Hello, everybody. Uh, we wish you a very nice day. And today we have a special guest here, Adrian Bronson. Hello, Adrian. Welcome here.
Hello, Maria. How are you? How's everybody doing today?
I'm very well, and I hope everybody else is very well. How are you, Adrian?
I'm still alive and kicking.
That's good. That's good. And Adrian, so before we start the interview, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Oh, there's so much to say, I suppose. Choose the information that's important. Well, I'm a native speaker from Canada, and I've been living in Slovakia for about 7 years now. So
Oh, so
it's
it's 7 years already.
it's a long
Mhm.
time. Yeah,
It's a
yeah.
long time. And before Slovakia, did you live in another European country or
I did.
Slovakia
I
was
lived in
your...
Hungary before coming to Slovakia. So
Okay. So
very close
could
by.
you... that's a very interesting combination, Hungary and then
Mhm.
Slovakia. Could you tell us a bit more about this stay in Hungary and in
Of
Slovakia?
course. Sure. Wow. Well, when I was living in Canada, I was looking for new opportunities, and I realized that I wanted to have some international experience. So I contacted my university, and they were able to offer me a fellowship to study. And I was able to choose from a variety of different places, some of them being Paris or London or Moscow. But what appealed to me the most was an opportunity to study in Hungary, which for me has a very close relationship to music. And I thought this is going to be a great idea. So, a new language closer to the culture that I'm used to, which is all of the classical composers or decomposers now. And I thought this was great. So, I took that opportunity. And then
Wow.
later,
So
yeah,
sounds interesting. I have already mentioned in the introduction of you that you are also a musician. So the subject that you studied in Hungary was music, not teaching. Yes.
no, actually, it was neither. I took Hungarian studies, which
Oh, I
includes
see.
culture and language, but I used the opportunity to get acquainted with the conservatory system. So I went over there and knocked on some doors and found that one of the opera singers needed a pianist for that year as a coach. So I apprenticed with her. So this is where I was able to continue the music and get connections.
Wow. Wow.
Mm,
Interesting. Very interesting. And
yeah.
so, Adrian, you speak Hungarian?
At a basic enough level. I mean, I can survive.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
amazing. Not many Canadian people could say that they speak Hungarian. I,
Probably not.
I, I think.
Unless they have family that's Hungarian.
Yeah, yeah, it's very, very uncommon. I would say this combination.
I would agree. Yeah.
So you special in this way.
Perhaps, yes.
How long did you stay in Hungary?
I was there for 2 semesters.
2 semesters,
Mm.
and then what brought you to Bratislava?
Well, Bratislava was a very close place. I mean, it was the former coronation city of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. It's a very important city in Central Europe. They called it many different things like Pressburg or Pozsony or eventually Bratislava. I think that was maybe the newest name that they had for it. And I was thinking about staying in Hungary. However, the economic situation wasn't that great, still isn't that great at the moment. And I was looking for an opportunity to stay because I realized if I was going to live in Europe, I needed to get a job that I could do. And it didn't appeal to me to go and work at Tesco and stock shelves. I mean, it's a respectable job, but I didn't think I was going to be able to pay my bills, but also have enough money to do some exploration of Europe and also to eventually go home and meet my family again. So I was looking in the area and I sent some applications out and found that I got a majority of responses from Bratislava. And I started with an English school here, of course, which
Uh,
was great.
which was great. And this was your first experience with teaching in Bratislava, teaching English, I mean.
Yes, it was.
Mm-hmm. And so that's very interesting, all this history of your decisions and
Uh-huh.
movements and everything. And I can see that you know a lot about history of Bratislava. That's very interesting too. It's not that common. And Adrian, so when you started teaching, how did you find it? Was it something new and exciting for you? Was it something exciting but difficult? How
Mm.
did you find it? How was it for you in the beginning?
It's a great question. I've been teaching my whole life, so it wasn't new for me. It was just different teaching a language that I knew more intrinsically than outwardly. For example, we talk about this a lot, especially in the CELTA certification, about intrinsic and extrinsic language learning, of course, like the things that you know internally and the things that you learn. So often the case is that people who learn English and then teach English have a better understanding of the rules than the
Mhm.
people who speak it from birth. Now, if you're a native speaker of a language, then you can definitely learn some additional skills that would make you more effective as a teacher. And because you know it from your birth, you can apply those skills. But it really takes a lot of effort. I mean, I realized that there was a lot of missing information, things that I didn't understand. I mean, we use most of the 12 tenses in English. I would say probably 10 in daily conversation. There are two that we don't really use, which is like future perfect continuous and often future perfect. But I mean, future perfect continuous, we almost never use that, but it
I,
exists.
yeah, to be
Yeah,
honest, I know I'm not a native speaker, so I don't
yeah.
use English that
Mm,
much, like you do, for example.
mm,
But for me, I think I have never used future perfect continuous. I have definitely used future perfect simple, but not often. But continuous, I don't think that I have ever
exactly.
used that
that's
tense.
that's the whole point. They exist. We don't use them often, but you have to know how to use them anyway. And until I started studying it, until I started looking at the grammar and started teaching it, I didn't realize that there was actually a lot of depth to it.
Yeah.
And so when you start looking at it from that perspective, you have to be knowledgeable about this because a student will ask you something and you have two options. You can just make something up and perhaps look like an idiot, or you can say, listen, I don't know the answer to that question, but I will get back to you. And you can learn something about it. So the questions I was being asked were really helpful because I took it upon myself to say, hey, this is something that somebody wants to know. So this is something that I should know so I can help them with that. So eventually, over some time and with some teaching experience, I got to know the grammar of the language quite. And that was something that I really appreciate. In fact, I question why don't we do this back home? I mean, anybody who learns a language as a native language should also learn the grammar behind it and to be able to teach it. And I know that in the Slovak school system, there's a lot of emphasis on grammar.
It
So
is.
this
It
is
is,
good.
but it's a question if it's really that important for common
Mm.
life, or if there shouldn't be some kind of how would you say balance? Because I think in Slovakia we have too much grammar, and we put too much pressure on kids
Mm.
to learn it. You probably know that in Slovak language we have meké i and tvrdé i.
Yeah.
Like
But
Y
that
and
was from
I.
Hatala. This guy should be brought out. He should dig his body up and smash his bones because I
Yeah.
can't imagine how someone could have screwed up the language even more. But the complicated thing is that um, I think Stur made a really great addition to the
You have
language.
great
And then
knowledge of our history.
somehow
I'm
along the line, this
surprised,
guy
Adrian.
comes around and he says, okay, let's make this difficult. Let's make this so difficult that if kids don't understand the difference between I and Y, then people will think they're stupid. And they all got together and said, yeah, that's a great idea. Let's do that. And this is how we have it.
I see it exactly the same way.
Mm-hmm.
And for example, for me, I always had problem with Y and I in Slovak language, and we had
Mm.
these like dictations, which was very common. Like once
Yeah.
or twice a week at school, we did this exercise, grammar exercise, and it was
Mm.
very difficult for me when I was young. And now I'm having the same problem with my son. And if I had that power, I would definitely change it. And in Slovak language, there would be no
Mm.
Y and I. But yeah, but you know a lot about our history. I'm really shocked and impressed, Adrian.
Thank you. I think there's two possible solutions to this problem. One is that you use a Y with a dot in the middle just to be rebellious, or You just learn it. I mean, you have to understand English is not a phonetic language at all because we've borrowed from every single language of the countries that surrounded England. So why would it be phonetic or how could it be? So the
Ah,
thing
I
is that
love
when you,
English. I think it's beautiful
yeah,
language, and you have no Y and no. Well, you have Y and
we have
I.
why, of course we do.
You do, you do. Yeah, I'm sorry for
Mm.
that. You do, but not in that difficult way like we do in
No,
Slovak
no, but this
language.
is a matter of spelling. It's not even a grammar rule. It's like this is how this is spelled, right? Dobry is with a Y, of course.
Yeah,
If you, why do you have to worry about the spelling? I mean, from an English spelling perspective, everything has to be learned. You can't spell anything phonetically. Although once you get used to English spelling, you can kind of surmise what some of the rules might be. But every single word has to be memorized. So, as an English speaker looking at this form in a different language, I don't see the difficulty in it. You just have to learn it and stop trying to make it such a difficult exercise. And
true.
that's it.
True. But for example, Dobry, the one you mentioned, it can
Mm-hmm.
be with Y and it can be with I too, because with
Mm-hmm.
I, it is in case that there are more people or more things. So when it's plural, it's with I, and when it's singular, it's with I. So
Sure.
there are
Yeah.
some rules here, but
Well, yes. This is
well,
just something you have to learn, right? For
yeah,
example,
true.
I fly, Fly, or he flies, Flies. You just have to understand that. I
Yeah,
understand. I
true,
understand
but
from a
for me,
perspective.
English
Yeah.
language is
Mhm.
much easier than Slovak language, and I wish we could make it easier for Slovak kids to learn
Yeah.
Slovak
The
grammar.
basics of English are a lot easier to grasp because we don't have genders with any of our nouns. It makes it a
True,
lot easier. There are no cases. And so the basic A1, A2, you can learn it really, really quickly. In fact, you can be speaking quite fluently in a few months if you really set yourself to it. But then the difficulty in the language comes when you have to look at the tenses, when you have to look at the prepositions that
true.
we
You
have,
have tenses, yeah,
phrasal verbs, etc., etc. So
yeah,
this is when
that's
you
true.
realize that actually English is not as simple as you would expect, and also you start to appreciate when you learn other languages that every language is difficult. To learn any language is just a process of going step by step and having the will to do it and perhaps a good book and a teacher.
True. I agree. And Adrian, you use some Slovak words too. Do you speak Slovak language?
Not so bad. It's better
Oh,
than my
wow.
Hungarian now, but I don't study.
Wow. So I'm really impressed. You know our history. You speak the language. That's amazing. And so you've been here already 7 years.
Yeah.
And what's the magnet? What's the motivation staying here? Why do you like staying in Slovakia?
What I like about Slovakia is its position within Europe. It's right in the center. And this provides you access to the west and to the east. If you look at the fact that Szwechat Airport is only 35 kilometers from Bratislava, you can basically fly anywhere you want to. I mean, I one time by mistake, and this is not something I'm terribly proud of, but I did buy a ticket to Milan, and it was only 10 euros. But I booked it for the month after I was supposed to, and I sent it to my friend and said, "Hey, I'm coming to visit. What are we doing?" And she mentioned, "Well, this is for the wrong month." And actually, there was nothing I can do because the processing fee to refund the ticket is actually more than the ticket itself.
Mhm.
So I just let it lapse. So I lost 10 euros. I bought a ticket and I never used it, and rebought a second one for the proper date. This is Central Europe. You have to understand that in Canada, like I'm from Winnipeg, and Vancouver is 2,100 kilometers, so
Mhm.
2,100 kilometers away.
Mhm.
This is a 2 days drive. We do it in 2 days. Um, or if you want to fly, it's 2.5 hours. So 2.5 hours is, I'd probably say Moscow from Bratislava.
Mhm. Mhm.
Isn't it an hour and a
Or
half
Spain.
from here to England? Is London
From
one and
to
a half or
England,
two
it's
hours?
less than 2 hours. I think it is to
So it's
London.
approximately the same cost, and you can get
Hmm.
a flight to England for anywhere from 20 to 50 euros, right?
Yeah, true.
Now in Canada, if you want to fly from Vancouver to Winnipeg, a one-way flight is about 300 euros.
Oh, wow.
You understand? So this is the difference when there's no demand, and no competition. So living in Europe has a lot of benefits to it. Slovakia's position is great. And also, I'd say it's a relatively safe country. I mean, every country has their problems, so you can't just point at other countries and say, you do this and you do that. I mean, Canada has problems too. Just read the news, you'll understand. But
Yeah,
the position in Europe
I
is
agree.
fantastic here. So.
What about the food? Is there a big difference between the food in Canada and in Slovakia?
Well, I don't know. Canadians, we don't really have a national dish except for poutine, which is
Pudding?
these poutine.
Poutine. I have never heard of this.
We have to fix that. Actually, one of the food trucks at the Stara Tržnica has a poutine truck. There's a poutine truck.
Really? In Stara
basically
Tržnica?
Let's not oversimplify it, because I think any Canadians watching this might get offended, especially if they're French Canadians, because we're talking about the French Canadian dish, poutine, Poutine, not the same as Putin, much more tasty and less disgusting. And if you look at it, they're French fries that are fried, often in pig fat, much like this Orbis in downtown Bratislava. And then they put this curded cheese. It's like little pieces of cheese. I can't really describe it. It's usually soft. It's kind of chewy. It's very much like the consistency of nite or paranica. And on top of that, they put a very, very, very thin gravy. Gravy is like a beef sauce, like a hot beef fomachka or something like that. And so it's beautiful, fresh, crispy fries that taste like animal fat.
And you can get something like this in Stara Tržnica? Are you sure?
Oh yeah, of course.
Yes.
When they have the food trucks there, there's usually a poutine truck there. You really have to check it out.
Yeah. So it's not like every day. It's only
No.
when they have the food truck there.
Yeah.
I see.
Yeah.
Oh, I would love to try that. Sounds good.
Yeah, it sounds really great. So that's our national dish. And I don't know, we like pancakes and things like that, but that's not really, I mean, if you look at the history, pancakes are not really anything that you can tie to one nation. You know?
They're everywhere. Yeah, true. It's like French fries. You have them everywhere.
Yeah, and the French don't even eat them. They call
Yeah,
them
true. That's very true. Yeah.
Okay, so getting back to your question about the food, Slovakia's food has like 4 groups. There's like potatoes, cheese, smoke, and garlic. This is the
What was
flavors
the
of
number 4? Smoke?
smoke, like
Smoke.
udani.
Wow, udenini. I see.
Udani, sorry. Okay, so it's like smoked everything. Everything's smoked. These are the flavors of the cuisine, but you have to understand. I mean, people were working fields and growing, and this was the food that you needed to survive the day.
Yeah, thick. Yes, a heavy food. Mainly in the past.
It's not
That's
bad.
true.
I love potatoes. Not so much on the really sharp cheeses or really the heavy cheeses. I don't like brinza, but I've tried brinza halushki. It's very close to mac and cheese back home, just a bit stronger. Yeah.
Yeah, slightly different.
Yeah, a little bit.
Okay. Thank you for all this information and for the inspiration for Putin.
Poutine.
Now
Be careful though.
Poutine.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Poutine. Okay, I'm really looking forward to it, that I would try it. And back to teaching. Adrian, I know that you teach adults and teenagers and kids also. What age category of kids do you teach and you have experience with?
I have experience teaching kids from a 0 level up until about 13, 14. I did have a few late teenage clients that were maybe 17 years old, but most of the kids that I work with are between the ages of 8 and 13.
And what is your favorite age when you teach kids? You understand the question, yes?
I do understand the question. It's not about age; it's about willingness to work with me.
Understood.
So if they're nice to work with, they follow the instructions and they're pleasant and funny, which is usually most kids anyway, then they're really great to work with. It's like you have to be willing to laugh, you have to be willing to make fun of yourself, and you can't be so strict and boring. If you don't have a personality, you'll find working with kids really difficult.
I absolutely agree with that. When we have courses for teachers, we always say to our teachers that now when you're working with kids, you are not only a teacher, but you are also a showman, because
Yeah.
you need to change the lesson into a show. Otherwise, it will be boring for them, and they will not follow you. Uh, so I absolutely agree with that.
Great. Yeah.
And still, it is a difference when you're teaching kids before the school age, like up to 5, 6. And it is a huge difference, I would say, when you have kids about 6 when they go to school. Uh,
Yeah.
do you have preference, or it's still
Mm.
the same for you?
It depends. If a parent is willing to subscribe to enough hours weekly, then I don't mind taking them before public school, because then I can work with them more in depth. But to work with a child who can't read um, is difficult, because then you're focusing mostly on vocabulary acquisition. And I believe that this is the responsibility of the parents to do. So the parents should be speaking. But the overwhelming feeling that I get, or a thought that I get from Slovak parents, or at least parents from this area of Europe, is that they feel, for one, I don't speak English perfectly, so I can't teach my kids because they will learn incorrectly. Also, I don't know what I'm supposed to teach the kids. These are the two overwhelming things that I hear. So the first one is interesting because I'm not a teacher, so I can't teach. So using this logic, when your kid falls down and scrapes his knee, you shouldn't touch their knee. You should take them right to the hospital and get a professional doctor to take care of it, right? Or, well, you're not a chef, are you? Most people aren't. So you shouldn't be cooking food for your kids because you might be cooking garbage. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. I understand that it's about confidence. And the way that the school system is set up here, it's mostly, um, it's like binge learning, I would say. You memorize, you test, and you forget. There's no skills acquisition. So I can understand a person who studied a language for 10 years and still can't speak it. It could be pretty intimidating to speak with somebody. So they carry that fear onto the education of their children, unfortunately. So I would say that, you know, as a parent, you can be the main educator. And I found that of my clients, the clients whose parents speak English with them are usually among the best students in their school. And it doesn't mean that they're sitting there and doing lessons with them every night. You just start with something like you would learn any language. How do you say hello? Okay, now you meet people and you say, hey, say hello. So they're practicing it. It's more of just like thinking of a language as a synonym. So for example, I say hello or hi to my friends, or I say good day to people in a more formal way. Or when I'm in Slovakia, I say dobrý deň. This is my synonym for hello. I don't consider it another language. It's just a choice that I make depending on where I am and who I'm speaking to. So if you bring this to the table, then you don't have to be perfect. And the other thing about not being perfect and saying, oh, my kids are going to learn incorrectly, they're going to learn mistakes. Well, yeah, probably. I mean, even my mother's Canadian, and she speaks a dialect from where she grew up. And eventually in school, we started to realize, like, oh, some of the things that mom says aren't exactly what we would consider to be mainstream English. So this is the point where the children are able to discern between what they hear at home and what they hear that might be more useful in a larger audience. And so this is when the mistakes of the parents disappear. So this is why I feel like parents should take a more active role in it. So going back to what I was saying, a child beneath or outside of public school age, I'm willing to take them on only if there's enough time. Otherwise, I would rather just sell a set of my flashcards to the families and let them do their own work.
I must agree with you, and I'm quite surprised about what you just said, because this is exactly what we teach our parents at the courses which we have for parents. For we call it home English,
Right,
domáca
right.
angličtina, because I agree with you absolutely 100% that I think for the little kids, it is the best when their parents work with them and they surround them with English naturally, because the kid he doesn't care if it's English or Slovak. For them, it's only one way of communication, and he
Exactly.
doesn't care whether it is a glass or it is pohár.
Yeah.
So he will use whatever it's easier for him to say.
Right.
And I
Right.
speak with both of my sons English since they were very little, since they were babies. So both of them, they speak Slovak and English naturally.
Mm.
And it's a great thing, and it didn't cost me any extra money, and it didn't cost me much extra time, because what we did was that we surrounded ourselves, we created natural environment where there were both languages. We didn't have
Yeah.
lessons at home. We just
Mm.
we sometimes we would call it a glass, and sometimes we would call it pohár, and
Yeah.
for them it doesn't matter which of these terms we use. They understood, and they also
That's the whole
they use
point.
it,
Yeah. You have to do
and
that. Mm.
exactly what you said, it's very true that in Slovakia we fight these blocks, these mind blocks, which parents have, and it is that we don't believe in ourselves, and we are afraid that we will teach our kids something wrong, and we are trying to during the
Mm.
courses we are trying to explain to them that it doesn't matter. It is better to teach them little something than big nothing. So
Yeah.
even if they learn some mistakes, it doesn't matter, because even with Slovak language, we are not able to
Yeah.
teach them
Yeah.
100% correct.
Who
Correct.
speaks correct Slovak? Very few
Exactly. It's
people.
like you
Yeah.
said about your mom. It's the same with Slovak
Mm.
language, and it's the same with English when you
Mm.
teach your kids at home, or teach. I mean, teach like not real teaching, but natural teaching.
Yeah, of
And
course.
also, you mentioned another block, and that was that. And now I lost myself in it. It was this block that we are not perfect enough, that we are afraid that we will teach them mistakes, and the second one was, of course, that we don't speak English, and we are always trying to explain to the parents that it doesn't matter. You can learn with your kids, and
Right.
you can motivate each other.
Right. It's true. Hmm.
It's true. And there was something else, but you have already mentioned it. So very correct. And I'm very surprised that you, as a man and as a teacher, see it this way. I mean, surprised in a very positive way. It's nice to hear this opinion, and you really, really um, really see the Slovak people, the whole thing. Yes, that
Mm. I see
uh,
clearly. I see the
you
situation
see
clearly.
clearly the
Mm.
situation. I'm surprised because not many people are aware of these mind blocks, which are bad for us, because it's pretty simple to work with the kids at
Oh
home
yeah,
with
for sure.
English. So I agree with this. But back to your teaching. So you mostly teach kids from the school age, then, yes?
Yes.
And what are your favorite activities? What do you like doing with kids at this
Believe me,
age?
my teaching methods are really not that interesting. I'm a person that wants results, and I get results by doing. So once a kid can read, or up until a certain point, I use mostly Cambridge University Press books. So
With kids?
yeah, yeah, I start them
Hmm.
off with the Cambridge vocabulary book, book one,
Hmm.
and also Murphy's Red Grammar book,
Oh,
first
wow.
edition,
That's the one
or
I
the third
used at
edition. Mhm.
university.
Yeah, but it's basic stuff. It's like A1, A2. So it's all the things that the kids need to know. So I start with that, and we kind of cycle through. So and we just get them to read it, or I get them to read it. They read it back to me. I correct their pronunciation. I highlight words in their book that they had a problem with. That way I can flip through and know what they could have a test for later on. And they just do it. They read it, and then they write out the answers, and that's it. That's all.
I know that you have very good results with your kids, because from
Mm.
time to time I see that your students won some competitions, some prizes.
Hmm.
So now, after what you told me, that you are very, very demanding, I could use
Yeah.
that, you
Mm.
demand a lot from your kids. I see why your kids are so successful.
Thank you. You just have to
And
get them to do the work. That's all. I mean, if you want to run far distance, you have to run. Talking about running is not going to help. Me running and showing you how I'm running is not going to help. If you want to get better at language acquisition, you have to speak. because the problem is that I see from a lot of schools, and this goes even to when I was studying Spanish and Russian. The thing is, like, the teachers would do a lot of grammar exercises and book writing, and I have to tell you, think about it. We don't start actually writing and reading until we're about 6 or 7 years old and in primary school. How do we learn our language? We learn it by speaking and listening. So this way of learning languages through book learning and writing is so unnatural, and I don't understand why it's being taught like that. It's being taught like that because that's how people are teaching how to teach. There's no practicality to learning how to teach. And I
I
can say
agree
the
with
same
you.
thing. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Hmm.
From my time at Comenius University, I saw the same thing.
Yeah.
This is in a pedagogická faculta. So of course, this is training teachers how to teach. And I could see the resistance in a lot of the students for learning new techniques. They expected to show up. So I don't mean all of them, but I could really divide them into half. The open-minded ones and the ones who are really stuck in the old ways. The open-minded ones were like, great, we want new ideas. We want to learn how to do this. We love doing transcriptions. We love making narrations for videos. And the other half were saying, why aren't you giving us material to study? Because I feel like that half wanted to just show up for class, do their homework from other classes, and then before the test, a week or so, they would just cram whatever I was going to put on the exam and do it. But I was really excited about being able to do some skill development. So there were a number of students I feel that really benefited from that, and they saw the actions of it. It's got to be practical. The student has to do the work. They
So
focus upon this a lot in CELTA.
I absolutely agree with what you're saying.
Mm.
So how do you make it practical in your lesson? Inspire us.
Okay, let me get my book. I'll be right back.
Okay.
Okay, I need to get a couple books. You can still hear me though, can't you?
We can.
Okay, all right. So I'm gonna get some cards here.
And while Adrian is getting his materials, I just forgot to tell you that any questions you have for Adrian, just write us. And while Adrian is here, he can answer your questions, or he can answer it after the interview. But also while he is here, he can answer it right away. Okay, so Adrian is back.
I am back. So basically for kids that are learning vocabulary, or even just basic level kids, I have my flashcards here from Bunny Talks. And the great thing is for parents that you can, you look on the back, there's a question. So you know exactly how to write it, how to say it. And there's no question about, do I know this or not? Am I a teacher? So you ask the question, and you can find all of the answers on here. So we have a lot of different questions that you can do. And what this does is it gets the kids to be really, really comfortable with what you're teaching them. So for example, I'd ask the kids, I'd cover this up so they can't read it. I say, what are they? And they would say, it's socks, which is wrong. And I'd say, I'm sorry, it's, how many are there? There's one or two. And then say they, and then they get to see it and write it. So this is the speaking exercise that you would do with whatever you have. And you could even ask questions like, for example, what's he wearing? This is now present continuous. So there's a lot of options for just training basic questions and answers, because kids need to understand what something sounds like. They might read it, might think they know what it sounds like, but they need to hear someone say it in real time. And I don't slow down for anybody. If they don't understand it, I will say it again, and then I will sometimes translate or get them to translate backwards. So they're doing the work most of the time. But in a book like this, for example, you just go through and you just get the kids to read whatever is there. Anytime there's a problem, you just mark down the ones that they had an issue with pronunciation. And then on the second side, you go through here and you get them to say it first. You always have to get them to say it. You can take a lot more time when you're writing it to think out. And again, that's not the skill we want to make better. It's got to be speaking.
Speaking.
So, can they say it? And then can they pronounce it correctly? And then once that happens, can they spell it? And then that goes along with the whole idea of getting them to the next level. So it's basically just about speaking. You have to get them to speak.
I agree. I think that's the skill that we should be learning as the first one, and then it should be followed by
Yeah,
writing and spelling and all these
yeah,
things. I absolutely agree
yeah.
with you. That's why I don't understand these English dictations, which kids have at our schools at the age
Mm,
of 7, 8, 9.
yeah.
But never mind. It's something we cannot change. But
Yeah, no, you can, but you need a new education minister. You need somebody younger who's actually a professional teacher. But it seems like
yeah,
in Slovakia, nobody is doing the ministry job of any profession that they've actually studied or at least have written the dissertations for. They seem to just
that's
plagiarize
true.
everything they
That's
can.
true. And we are in politics now.
Yeah, we are.
Yeah, but I agree with you. And Adrian, do you have any tips for spicing the lessons? Some fun activity, something really that when you see that the kids had already enough of a grammar book
Oh
speaking
yeah. Mhm. Again,
something.
I'll answer your question. Listen, I told you again, I'm not really that exciting. I just get the results because I push the kids. But the kids don't work for nothing. They realize that okay, we have our hour lesson, and I say, hey, if you do your work and everything's okay and you behave yourself, I will give you 10 minutes of iPad time.
Of iPad time.
Hmm. So they can
Uh-huh.
watch whatever they want, or if they have a computer, they can play games for that 10 minutes. And we just sit
Uh-huh.
there and we
In
talk about what they're
English,
doing.
and
Yes,
and you are talking.
they have to, yeah, they have to
Mhm,
talk. It's not
mhm,
okay for them to just sit there and play. We have to
uh-huh.
talk about what's going on and everything else, or I
I
just
just
take
wanted
the
to make
iPad.
sure that I understand it correctly. So it's they
Yeah,
playing, but they still continuing the lesson. So it's little bit of a trick, but very good trick from your side. They happy that they playing, but they still talking in English and you
exactly. That's the whole
practicing.
point. Yeah.
Perfect. It's like have a break during the lessons
Mm.
with
Yeah,
offline lessons. When we have offline
yeah.
lessons with kids, in the middle of a lesson we have 5 minutes break when they
Mm.
get biscuits and water or some fruit, and they are looking forward to it because it's a break. But while this
Yeah,
break we are talking with them in English, so they continuing the lessons, but they are very
yeah. That's
excited that
great.
they are having
Yeah,
a great a
it
break.
has to be like that. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. Okay, great. So, Adrian, thank you very much for finding the time for the interview. I think it was very inspiring for us. Is
No, you're
there
very welcome.
anything that you would like to add to the interview? Any message for our teachers within our Facebook group?
Oh, wow. It's a good question. I would suggest if you can, if you can afford it, do a CELTA course. That you can do it in Bratislava, but if you want to take some time off from work and you can afford it, go do it somewhere else. I did mine in Krakow. It was so
Mhm.
amazing going to the city center by bike every single day, working on this intensively, because you can do it in 1 month or within 6 months. But I think doing the intensive program is really rewarding. You form some really strong professional bonds there. And the reason I say CELTA is because it teaches you everything that we've been talking about today, which is reducing teacher talk time and allowing kids to discover the rules and how things work in English on their own, not telling them, you're not lecturing them. They're not sitting there and listening, they're doing the work. And you just sit there and shut up and guide them. This is
And
really
guide them.
important. Yeah, it's really, really important. We call it guided discovery. So if you can afford to, or at least if you can plan to, go and get a CELTA, because the more people that get this training, this CELTA training, the more people who will bring this really more efficient way of teaching to whatever country they're going to. And if we're talking, of course, in Slovakia, the more CELTA certified teachers we have in Slovakia, the more effective the teaching will be, and potentially we can eventually um, exert a change over the general education that we receive in the public sector, you know. So unless
I
we start
agree.
changing ourselves, we're not going to be able to do anything for the kids who are studying, because let's be honest, I mean, not every family can afford to send their kid to English classes or even hire a private teacher. It's quite expensive for the average Slovak family. So how do we make it so that the education system that they're in is actually giving them the effective education that they need, right? That's the question. So, CELTA, all the way. Make your lessons practical. Give them a task to do. Make them speak. Make them write it out. And just sit there and be quiet and support them. And about support, it's really important too that we don't use negative conditioning like no, no, no. everything they do, you don't have to say yes every time. They do one thing right and you don't have to tell them yes. We don't want to condition them for that. But it's always good to reinforce that they're doing it. Yeah, that's great. Keep going. We have to positively reinforce things. And eventually when they do the work and they look back, or they go somewhere where they have to speak English and they can actually manage to do it, for them, that's the happiness, that's their freedom and their world opening up for them. And for the parents, that's their exoneration for saying, wow, I've invested this money and it's actually worthwhile. It's come to fruition for me. So, and then of course they'll keep you as a teacher.
Yeah, sounds all great. Thank you very much, Adrian, one more time for
Pleasure,
inspiring
Maria.
interview and for the motivation.
Yeah.
And we wish you all the best with your traveling and teaching.
Thank you so much. All the best,
Thank
guys. If you have
you.
any questions, just send me a message.
Thank you.
Bye.